So welcome to our session on MariaDB. You heard it from Andy yesterday, and you're going to hear it again, that I'm thrilled to announce that MariaDB is now available as a fully managed service on Amazon RDS. This is really an exciting event, and I'm also thrilled to have Steve Grancham from MariaDB, who is going to join me in talking about MariaDB and what is exciting there. So a little bit more on what we are announcing. It's available today. In fact, it has been available since yesterday, and we already have customers using MariaDB on RDS. This is MariaDB is available in all public AWS regions, and I believe that's a total of 10 regions around the world. And we are going to support MariaDB at least starting with 10.0.17. And it's going to be supported on all instance classes, current instance classes that we support in RDS, T2, M3, and R3 to be specific. We are going to support EBS storage volume up to 6 terabyte and 30,000 IOPS. It's the same price as it's going to be on both standard as well as encrypted volumes, so you can encrypt your data transparently. It's going to be the same price as RDS MySQL, both for on-demand and reserved instances. And you can start today in case you haven't started yet. You can go to aws.amazon.com/rds/MariaDB and you can create your own instance. So a little bit of background, and I'm going to leave most of it for Steve because he knows MariaDB much better than I do, is that it's a drop-in replacement for MySQL. So if you're using MySQL, you have MySQL snapshot, you can very easily migrate to MariaDB. And it's actually by the same set of people who got us MySQL, Monty and the team. And in fact, if you don't know, it's named after Monty's children. His first database was MaxDB, then MySQL, and then MariaDB, which is the third child that Monty has. And I don't know, and Steve might know that if there is a fourth one in the making, but require more work than coding. There's very strong support for MariaDB in the open source community. In fact, a lot of MySQL customers that I talk to have been asking us, why can't we support MariaDB? Because they're very excited about the open source energy behind MariaDB. And I would like to hear more from the audience also, what they think about it. And they're innovating faster because of the open source energy that they have, and delivering advanced feature more quickly to the community than we have seen for MySQL in the recent past. Specifically things like parallel replication or thread pool or some of the advanced feature which you typically get in MySQL Enterprise Edition, for which you have to pay a license fee. You get it for free in MariaDB, and that's one of the reasons a lot of people recently have migrated to MariaDB. In terms of adoption, this is something that has been picked up very well by the Linux community. In fact, most of the Linux distribution now have MariaDB as their default MySQL choice. So if you look at OpenSUSE or Red Hat or Debian or Fedora, they all use MariaDB. They have replaced essentially M in the LAMP stack with MariaDB instead of MySQL. And there is adoption from multiple places. There are 2+ million downloads, I think, last time I checked on MariaDB side from 45 countries, including major enterprises who are now using MariaDB or in their production application, or even contributing to MariaDB in terms of open source contribution. So for example, Samsung, if you go to Korea, where I have been a few months back, there are multiple people from the Samsung team who are requesting us if you can support MariaDB. Facebook, for example, is an active contributor to MariaDB, and we have been doing some work with them on some of the contributions that they have done. So there is a lot of energy behind it. I'm really happy that we can support it as a managed service now. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Amazon RDS, right? So MariaDB brings value in terms of the database that we are getting. So what does that RDS do? And RDS, as you know, is a managed database service in the cloud. And So MariaDB is going to be the 6th engine that we support in RDS. The others being MySQL, our newest engine, Aurora, Postgres, Oracle, and SQL Server, and MariaDB is going to be the 6th engine. There are more than 100,000 active customers, including many major enterprises who are using RDS today. And we are growing very fast, of course, like many other services in AWS. So in terms of the value that we bring to the table, if you host your databases on-prem, there are a whole bunch of things that you need to do, which you probably don't want to do if you're a database administrator or if you're an app developer, right? You have to do power and HVAC and your networks, you have to do rack and stack, you have to do server maintenance, OS installation, and all the muck that comes with running your database or any other software in a data center, right? But the thing that you're probably most interested in is designing your application, optimizing your database for your application. You don't want to spend time on doing all the muck and you leave it to somebody else who can do it probably at scale and probably cheaper. So, well, what about Amazon EC2? If we move our databases to EC2, which is what a lot of people did, and in fact, there are a lot of MySQL and MariaDB running on EC2, part of it now is taken care of by Amazon, right? You have OS installation, server maintenance, rack and stack, power, HVAC, et cetera, is done by Amazon, but you are still doing a lot of the muck yourself. OS patches, for example, database software installs, database patches, backups, high availability, instance and storage scaling, app optimization, of course, this is something you would like to do. What if we do it easier for you? And that's where RDS comes into play. With RDS, pretty much everything except for app optimization, which is your schema design, query optimization, query planning, et cetera, you do yourself. Everything else is done by RDS, including, for example, database backup, database patches, high availability, scaling, et cetera, right? That's the primary value proposition that we have. And you can see with respect to the number of customers we have, people find it quite valuable. So a few things I wanted to highlight in what we do in RDS, right? Some of the things which our customers really, really like is the high availability options that we have, right? The high availability both in terms of within a region and across the region, right? One of the features that we recommend everyone to use is our multi-AZ, which is our high availability option. And if you are in production environment, that is something you definitely should consider. We also offer cross-region, and I'm going to talk more about it, what we do in our cross-region replication and cross-region snapshot, which is a very good option for managed disaster recovery, right? It gives you a lot of advantage in terms of saving time and saving pain in what you need to do to set up your databases for disaster recovery. Other very valued feature and very liked feature in RDS is our managed backup and point-in-time recovery, right? If you are in database business for a while, you know that it's a painful exercise to take backups every night or every couple of hours. And God forbids if something happens and if you have to recover from that backup, and it's a huge pain. You leave that to RDS and your backups and your recovery is something that you take care of. Then a few other things which adds a lot of value, for example, push button provisioning. You can provision your database in a few minutes, right? In fact, if you start now, your RDS MariaDB probably should be up in a couple of minutes. And we do automated instance and storage scaling. So you can start with a small instance. You can, with a couple of clicks or an API call, you can grow that instance to be a much larger instance. In the weekend, if you want to either shut it down or you want to slim it down, you can do that. We do the same thing for storage scaling. You can start with a small storage volume when you just come in, and as your data grows, you can scale storage and make it much bigger storage, go all the way up to 6 terabyte. We recently increased that limit from 3 terabyte to 6 terabyte. Probably good enough for most of the databases I know of. And of course, patching, security, and other general care and feeding is all part of RDS offering. And all of these essentially lowers your TCO. You don't have to hire or spend your time doing things that you don't want to do and leave it up to RDS and AWS, and you can focus on what differentiates you in the marketplace. So a little bit more about multi-AZ. Right? This is, I strongly recommend somebody who is in the production environment to use multi-AZ. If you are a MySQL user or a MariaDB user, you know that replication is through bin log replication, which is asynchronous replication. Now, when you do asynchronous replication, and which is, by the way, a standard most people use, that's the thing that's available, there is a lag between what the master sees and the replica sees. And if something happens, and if you have to fail over, there is a chance that not everything that has been written to the master actually will end up in the replica when the replica comes up, right? So there is a chance of some amount of data loss. In multi-AZ, we solve that problem by doing replication synchronously at the storage layer. So you have your primary and you have your standby, and we are under the cover. Anything that you write to the primary is writing it over to the secondary or the standby, and it is up to date, and only when the standby has all the data or the latest updates, we respond back to the application saying that that transaction is stable on stable storage. We then monitor both the primary and the standby, and we have a pretty extensive monitoring infrastructure which monitors that. And when the primary is unavailable for whatever reason, it could be because the instance is unavailable, it could be because there is a network partition, it could be because there is storage latency which makes it inoperable, and we will automatically switch it over to the secondary, and there will be no data loss. And the switching, by the way, is pretty fast. Typically, it happens within 45 to 60 seconds, and depending on situation, it could be a little bit more than that, but that's acceptable in most cases, and your application will just see a blip. So if you are in a production environment, this is something that we strongly recommend. In fact, most of our enterprise workload and enterprise customers use multi-AZ. It is one of the most popular features. Customers like Samsung, Vodafone, Airbnb, Coursera are all using multi-AZ. In fact, we have seen very strong growth in multi-AZ after we launched it, and it's still growing very, very strongly. Going to cross-region. So multi-AZ, when you talk about multi-AZ, we are talking about having two database instances and the associated storage in two different data centers. But these two different data centers are within the same region, right? So for example, in Virginia, it will be in the Virginia region, in the Washington, D.C., Virginia region. In the West Coast, it will be in whatever region you are in, San Francisco or PDX. And Asia Pac, it will be in that region. So in some cases, customers would like to have a copy of their data in a different region, right? For various different reasons. It could be for disaster recovery, for example. It could be for reasons that you have customers all over the world, and you want to have a local copy which is closer to the customer, right? So one of the options that we offer is a managed cross-region read replica. So you can set up your read replica in a different region. So for example, if you're on the US East Coast, you can set up your replicas in South America or Asia Pac or the West Coast of the US, and you can do managed replication between your primary and your replicas. And if something happens to the primary, you can quickly promote your read replica as a master, and your disaster recovery is much, much faster than if you had to start from scratch. And as I mentioned, the other use case of read replicas is that, let's say, you have your users in multiple regions. You have in the US, you have in the Europe, you have in Asia Pac, and you want to make sure your data is available close to your users so that you don't have to go through read latency penalties when you try to read it from your databases. That's another reason to use read replicas. And by the way, this is all supported in MariaDB today, so you can set up your read replicas in multiple regions, and we manage it for you. Next, you can also do it in a slightly different way. If you, for example, don't want to have a read replica running all the time, but you want to have the choice of having a snapshot that is in a different region, and you want to, let's say, do nightly copies of the snapshot so that you have something which is recent enough, but may not be very recent, and you want to use that snapshot to bring up your replicas quickly in case a disaster happens. This is a cheaper cost option, but it works pretty well. It can be a warm standby for disaster recovery, and you can also use this as a base for doing migration to a different region, for example. Right? So this is another feature which is supported today. So going to some of the other interesting things that we do in RDS and which is supported in MariaDB today is our security features, right? Many of you would be interested in some of the security features that we have. The first is the transparent encryption that we do, and this is both for data at rest as well as data in motion. For data at rest, it's a KMS integrated encryption mechanism that we have. We use 2 levels of encryption keys just to keep it simple in case you want to rotate your data keys, for example. So there is a master key which is managed by KMS, and then you have various different data keys that you can use to encrypt your data, right? If you have to, for example, for whatever reason you want to rotate your data keys, you don't have to change your master key, right? It makes it a lot easier to operate. And you might want to do that. For example, you have a database which you want to discard and you don't want anybody to use that data anymore. You can discard that key, and that's all that you need to do. We also provide, for example, database instance IP firewall. We provide VPCs. And MariaDB is going to be available only in VPCs. We don't support Classic, and that's probably a better thing. And with VPCs, you can control access to your database at network level with various different security policies that you can set up. It's also integrated with AWS User Access Management, IAM, and it provides resource level permission control for various different user level control. Monitoring. If you are doing your application development or your application hosting on AWS, you would like to see how your database is performing, right? And in fact, this is something that we support today with a number of metrics, tens of metrics that we support today, including CPU utilization, storage, memory utilization, swap space, and these are all available through CloudWatch metrics. And you can see this for your instance on the RDS console. So when you set up your database, you can see how they are performing through CloudWatch metrics. We are actually very excited to pre-announce or announce another very interesting feature or addition to our monitoring. A lot of our customers have told us that they love the managed service, but they would like us to be more transparent. They want to see what we see, right? And we listen to them. And this is a new feature which is going to come in the coming weeks. There is an internal code name for this. We don't have a name for it yet. I guess we'll just call it monitoring for now. And what it does is that you will get a lot more metrics than what you have today. You'll have 50 plus new metrics, OS and systems level metrics. You're going to see, for example, a process list, something that you see through top, and you can sort that process list also in your view. And the matrix granularity will be a lot higher. We used to have, for example, 5 seconds level granularity, or maybe a little bit higher than that. And with the new monitoring that is coming, you can get all the way from 1 to 60-second granularity. Now, you can consume these metrics in various different ways. It's going to be available through RDS AWS console, and the console will have your own customizable dashboard. So for example, various different metrics, you can move them around on the dashboard. You can change the shape and size of that particular metric so that you can create a bigger one for something you're more interested in, smaller one that you are not interested. You can have a graph view or just a number view. You can set alarms. And what is even more interesting that these metrics are also going to be available, and we are going to stream this in JSON files into CloudWatch logs. And you can then integrate that into third-party dashboards like Graphite or Ganglia or tools that many people use, right? So you don't have to use, for example, RDS console, and that actually comes very handy. So for example, if you have entire application stack, you have application servers, you have web servers, you have databases, some of them running in RDS, some might be running in EC2, some may be running in on-prem, and you want to put all of this together on a single dashboard, right? And you can do that on your favorite dashboard using the new advanced monitoring feature that's coming. So in terms of pricing, as I said, this is going to be exactly the same price that we have for RDS MySQL. There are different types of instance that we support. The general purpose instances like the T2s start at less than 2 cents an hour. This with 1 vCPU, 6 credits per hour, 1 GB of memory. And then you have, for example, more high performance one, the memory optimized options that we have, the R3 instance class, where you can start with R3.large, which is 2 vCPUs, about 15 gig of memory, and that starts at 24 cents an hour. It's very simple pricing. There are no licenses, no lock-ins, pay only for what you use. And if you sign up for RIs, there will be up to 47% discount on 1-year RIs and up to 70% discount on 3-year RIs. And all of this pricing, of course, available on our webpage. Now, you are thinking, okay, I'm all sold. Get me in there. How can you get into MariaDB and start using it if you are already running in on-prem or EC2, right? So, there are many ways of doing that, of course. I'm really excited to announce AWS Migration Service. This is a new service that is very recent, but it's very versatile service. And using the AWS Migration Service, you can migrate from pretty much any database into MariaDB or any other database for that matter, right? It could be from like to like, or it could be from one database to a different kind of database, right? So if you want to migrate, for example, from MariaDB running on-prem or MariaDB running on EC2 to MariaDB on RDS, you can use the migration tool. If you want to migrate from MySQL or Oracle running either on-prem or EC2 into MariaDB in RDS, you can do that through the AWS migration tool. And while you are doing that, you don't have to shut down your apps. You can do that while your apps are running. What it does is that it captures a baseline, migrates that baseline or snapshot, and then it does change capture and move the changes over to the new database and cuts over when you are ready to switch over. You can start your migration, set up that tool within 10 minutes. And as I said, you can migrate from pretty much anywhere into RDS, MariaDB, or any other RDS database using the migration tool. Some little bit of quick cartoon animation. The way it starts is that you are in the customer premise. You set up the replication instance in AWS or RDS. Then you connect the source and target databases that the tool automatically takes care of. Then you select tables, schemas, or databases that you want to migrate. And then the database migration happens automatically. And when you are ready to switch over, then you can switch over to the new database that you have within RDS. Now, other thing which is interesting, that if you are migrating from MySQL or MariaDB into RDS, I think data transfer is all that you need to do. But if you're migrating from a different database, and a lot of people are interested in that, especially with the expensive licenses of commercial databases, is that you can use AWS schema conversion tool. You can migrate off Oracle and SQL Server. You can actually move your table, views, stored procedures into MySQL, MariaDB, and Amazon Aurora today. And just for sake of completeness, you would be able to do that for Postgres very soon. And as you all know that some of this migration, when you're migrating from Oracle and SQL Server to a MySQL instance family like MariaDB, not everything will be automated. And let's say 80% of the work will be done by the tool, but rest 20%, it will be highlighted and you can go back there and do your manual edits to make sure everything works. Getting started with MariaDB, it's all available on our portal. You can go to aws.amazon.com/RDS/MariaDB. You have pricing information and the user guide all available on the portal, so get started whenever you are ready. So what I'm going to do, instead of taking questions now, before I go there, and you can start your trial for free. You can use the AWS Free Tier for that. There is enough credit out there so you can run for your first tier pretty much free with T2 micro instance. You'll also get 20 GB of instance storage and 20 GB of backup, which is all included in AWS Free Tier. So a happy using of MariaDB. With that, let me hand over to Steve, and we will take questions at the end of the session. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Borrow that clicker from you. All right. It works. All right. Thanks again very much. We are very happy to be here and happy that you are here. My goal in the next few minutes is to just give you a perspective on Maria, why it's a good choice for you, why it's a good fit, I think, for Amazon and Maria. My role, I run the North America operation for MariaDB. That includes the partnerships, the business development side, the sales teams, the sales engineers. And so I talk to customers every day, and I get sort of a common thread when I talk to people. They sort of heard of Maria, they're not really understand maybe sort of exactly the whole story. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background there and sort of try to paint the right transition why this is a good choice for Amazon and for RDS. So it's sort of an intersection of a big, bad bunch of worlds out there, right? On the database side, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but there's about 225 databases at our last count that we sort of see. I'm not saying we track all of them, but 451 and all of those folks do. It's about a $45 billion market. So if you think about the complexity and the choice, and Dipanjan, you mentioned 6 databases available in RDS. I mean, that's a pretty elite company for us to be in. We're excited, really, to be in that company. But why? Why are your customers asking you? Why is Amazon making this commitment? And so maybe I could share with you just a little bit of why we think that's happening and other things that we're seeing going on in the market. So this, to us anyway, is sort of the next step of what's been a very interesting journey over the last 6 years. That is another piece of a journey that literally started 20 years ago. So everybody's familiar with MySQL, and I think there's some familiarity there's a relationship between MySQL and the founders and MariaDB and the founders. And that all got started really around the time when MySQL was acquired by Sun and then subsequently acquired by Oracle. I was on a call with Monty a couple of days ago talking to one of our large customers up in North America, and the CTO asked Monty, why did you do this? Why was it that important to you? And basically, he had a very simple answer. He said, when I started MySQL, I was very committed to an open source, transactional, relational database that could continue to evolve and grow, not under the direction of a single vendor, but really under sort of the direction of its users in the community. And it sounds like a kind of a simple, directional statement, but it's really driven everything that he has done. And that's really why the move from MySQL to Maria, and why so much of the momentum in the market. I mean, Maria's got legs in the market. You covered some of the things, but if you think about, there's really a couple pieces of evidence that I would just say if you're considering Maria, maybe you're already there, and so I'm preaching to the choir, but if you're sort of thinking about it, is it a right fit? All the Linux distros have already moved. They're already shipping Maria. I think you had that slide up there, Red Hat, Tuesday, all of those folks. A lot of the very large community users, all of the names that you went through, Facebook, Wikipedia, Twitter, a big chunk of the community has already moved. IBM has just ported Maria to their Power architecture, Pivotal, Cloud Foundry is now jumping. There's a lot of people that move here with RDS and Amazon. So the momentum is just continuing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So I think you mentioned a couple million users, 45 countries. So the momentum's picking up, actually. I mean, it's picking up steam, it's picking up speed. And there's a couple of things that I think are key in there. And I'll try to demonstrate this without boring you to tears. But it goes back to the open source piece. And if open source is important to you and it's important to your organization, that's really why Maria has been spawned as sort of the next generation, if you will, from the MySQL founders. So a couple of key pieces that we think fit here. Innovation is key, and I'm going to talk about what do we really mean by that. I mean, all products move forward, everybody innovates, but I think innovating in the open source space is a whole different game, and being able to take advantage of the community pace of innovation is absolutely critical and is a big time differentiator if you're going to be on the Maria team as opposed to some other options out there for you. The collaboration, standing up here with you guys is a great example of that, with a lot of key partners, even with customers that drive this. And then sort of the obvious on the back end, being able to interoperate. I mean, you talked about being able to convert data and all that, and that makes sense. So, but for us, innovation continues to sort of be the need, right? Everything's changing, compute platform's changing, we're a small company, and we're focused on continuing to drive the database platform, but we can't do it by ourselves. If you look at this list here, there's half a dozen areas that are all big words, right? Scalability, performance, availability, those are all really important. But in order to move the product forward in all of these key areas sort of at the same time, there's a key theme underpinning all of this, which is the open source theme, the community theme. I bolded a couple of them here. I'm not going to talk about all these because we just certainly don't have time. But the ability, if you were in the MySQL world, and I don't know if anybody in here, you probably have some affinity to that, that's why you're here, I'm assuming. But if you were in the MySQL world, replication was not MySQL's strong suit, right? I mean, it's been sort of a pain and a thorn for a long time. And people have looked at many, many different ways to do that. So there are some capabilities in Maria 10 on the replication side, multi-source, parallel replication. I'm going to talk about one of those in a little bit more detail today. The performance around the query optimization and this whole notion of how do we interoperate in the NoSQL world with JSON or those kinds of things. Those are all really important. So in order for us to continue to drive that, open source has to be a piece of it. And it's really the underpinning of what makes Maria the engine that sort of really, the little engine that could, so to speak. I mean, the momentum is picking up. I'm not going to go through these in a lot of detail, but keep in mind, just look at the companies that are up there. Taobao is a Chinese equivalent to Amazon, really, on the retail, I guess on the retail side, you could say. A number of other players here contributing all different kinds of things, optimization on Power, clustering with Galera. You mentioned encryption at rest. Very big contribution coming in there, the web scale folks. All of this innovation is happening within the data engine, the database itself, and we're not writing. This is all coming from the community. And the community is extremely broad, very rich, and it moves really fast. And that's why saddling up with an engine like Maria, as you sort of move through the next generation of database capabilities and compute platforms, you need to be with we believe anyway, the power of the pace of that community contribution is what is going to continue to drive the performance. And that's why it's going to be a platform that makes sense for Amazon to support an RDS, because people are going to be wanting to jump on board there. So let me just give you here's one example of a pretty big enhancement, I guess you could say, that was contributed by the community, by Taobao. So, and I picked this one because it's important and involves replication. I mean, if you were in the MySQL world, this has been a problem. The ability now to take, in a different use case, multiple sources from all different kinds of places, replicate that data out to a number of replicas all sort of at the same time without sort of slowing down any one single master in the process, a replica is not an easy task, right? And it would have consumed a significant amount of engineering time. This use case was specifically put together to handle a data warehouse application. So you could have multi-source replication going on at the same time, multiple masters, all feeding from different applications, all sort of feeding into one common replica that you can then manage from there. So that was a very significant piece. And I've got a dozen up there that we could go through, but I'm just trying to illustrate the point that the relationship that is created between the community players and Maria is, I mean, people talk about open source all the time and talk about it as a concept, but this is a reality of what happens literally every day in terms of the contributions, the innovation that's happening within the community. And then Maria, as sort of the steward of that community contribution, sort of has their own set of things that we can add to that in terms of, you know, hardening and services and the traditional things you would see from a commercial open source vendor, right? But being able then to sort of marry that, deploy it in this Amazon platform in RDS to allow that to come to you literally, instantly, is what we think a very good example of that whole collaborative nature in the community. So the other thing I wanted to share with you just about Maria, so that's, I think, a lot of the reasons is driving what's going on here with Amazon today and what we're seeing in the market. But there is another level here of offerings within that Maria brings to the market. There is an enterprise edition of this, and you know, somebody asked me literally before the session, we were standing out here and someone asked me, well, what's sort of in this with you? I mean, you guys are standing up here and it's an RDS offering and it's not really direct revenue generating for us, but it's very important that the adoption continue, that people continue to deploy in critical production environments. There's going to be cases where there is a need for a combination of what Amazon and RDS is bringing and what we can bring as a partner sort of beyond that. So our enterprise edition this summer, you know, working with all of our key partners, focused really on two key themes. One is enabling developers and sort of driving productivity in that space. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you, if you're not familiar with it today in the enterprise edition, is a product called MaxScale. I'll go back to the names of the children, but this literally was named after Monty's son, Max. That is where the name came from. It kind of fits, I think, what it does as well. But it's a database aware proxy. The concept here in the enterprise edition is to be able to sort of offload a lot of the processing capabilities that can tie up your application, can tie up sort of the front end of what's happening, maybe even tying up some of the back end, right? So it can do all different kinds of things in sort of this component-based architecture around, you mentioned, I think, binlog. We'll use binlog, I think, because it's a good example that maybe fits people in the replication scenario, to be able to sort of offload that entire process of managing all those changes in the binlog and trying to be able to figure out what to do with those, how to keep them all in sync, how to replicate them. Think of this notion of being able to sort of remove that entire process and run it and multiples of it sort of on separate kind of threads. This is what, again, a community contribution, a large customer of ours, Booking.com, which is sort of the European equivalent, I guess, of Expedia, you could say. So very high volume site, lots of volume, lots of power, and lots of transactions coming through here. And they basically were able to take, using MaxScale, that whole process of basically a binlog server, binlog router, right out, put it right on MaxScale, relieve the sort of the backlog, I guess, the burdens of the application processing itself, and allow things to sort of spin on their own thread, if you will. Most of their applications, most of the user-facing apps read data from the replicas. They don't have to worry about getting, you know, directly back into the slaves, and so it's a much faster performing, user-performing application with that. So it's an example of what we think together in this partnership will allow sort of a lot of hybrid use cases to come to life. You know, people have been talking about them, and I'm not saying people aren't doing these, but we see these are probably the four common things that I see in talking to customers, right? They're certainly interested and very excited about RDS, very excited about getting Maria up here. But there are things that they still have to do sort of on-prem. There's sort of this hybrid environment that we're all, real world, we're sort of all living in day to day. And being able to work, I think, jointly with Amazon, with you as customers, and then another relationship with Maria to support these kinds of cases, right? Whether it's a backup scenario, maybe it's a pure DR scenario that people have to find a way to exist with today. I mean, the most common thing I think that people are doing is starting in sort of the dev test environment. They're offloading some of these functions And then they're really looking at ways, how do we best take advantage of our application architecture to handle sort of this bursting load up into the cloud, and what's the easiest and best way to do that? And we've done some work together, specifically with our connectors, right? With your engineering team, our engineering team, making sure that those things are all working in sync in the RDS environment, and finding really key ways to enable you with a combined relationship with Amazon, with RDS, and with Maria when it makes sense, to get the right sort of enterprise scale deployment for Maria.